Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey there, welcome to the program. It's the 20th of the third month of 2019, and the clock just keeps on ticking. Time just keeps on and here we are. I keep saying it's too early to talk about who the Democrats are going to be running against Donald Trump, by all indications, Donald Trump. And I guess the first debates are scheduled for what? June? Is that possible? Yeah? I wish we did elections differently in this country. I was at a dinner last night and somebody was talking about how they'd been in Germany and when their big national election was taking place, and how different it was. First of all, how more compacted it is, and how there are many more restraints on, how campaigning can be done and money in it. And we really have mucked this up, I think. So Joe Biden, being uncoy, clearly is jumping in. We're already, of course, media being what it is, talking about polls and who's on top. And of course, the people on the top of the Democratic polls are people who Democrats know. They're not some of these new folks that haven't gotten into our line of vision, and it's silly. It's just plain silly. It would behoove the media to instead make an effort, more of an effort, to introduce us. I'll give CNN credit for doing their town halls with every candidate. That is, if somebody is serious about wanting to get to know each and every one of these people, that certainly is a pretty good introduction. But mostly on a daily basis, it is, of course, the horse race. Even now, when we don't even have a full field, who's ahead, who's behind, who's raised the most money, and none of that serves the interests of those of us who want to choose wisely, and none of that serves the national interest, I don't believe. So Biden is telling everybody but us that, although he slipped the other day and said it, it's all so silly. So he's going to run. And right away he becomes a front runner. Bernie Sanders, front runner, because they're known. Been there, done that. They've both run before. And they're, of course, two old white men. Not that I would not vote for a white man, even an old white man. But because they're old white men, they've been allowed to be in the game a longer time, and as a result, now they look to be at the head of the field. A younger white male seems to be making inroads, and that would be Beto O'Rourke. And, I have to say, initially when I first learned about his existence, it was when he was challenging Ted Cruz for the Senate seat from Texas. And it was an audacious challenge because Texas is Texas. And Beto captured the media's attention by virtue of frankly, his charisma. There's something about him, the man, that is very attractive. I'm not. You understand what I'm saying? That like a magnet, attractive, and he also showed ability to raise money. That people who found him attractive were giving money to him, and also people were giving money to him because they sensed a possibility of getting the loathsome Senator Cruz out. But, and here again, I don't want to, any of these people that are currently vying for this nomination would be 100-fold better than the current occupant of the White House. I do not want to belittle any of them. I really do not. Beto, for me, has lost a little luster because I'm increasingly concerned that he seems to be more superficial. Is what I'm going to say. That he clearly is a good candidate, and the skills of a candidate are not necessarily the skills of an executive, which I've said a million times. And this is just an unfortunate truism that the people who somehow know how to be attractive and win elections don't always know how to do the job once they get it. So I'm a little concerned about Beto being a great candidate, but I don't want to call him an empty suit, but maybe not a lot there beyond that attraction. That's just my first sort of feeling about him. Could be totally wrong. I'm totally open to Beto O'Rourke for president if that's what it comes to. I keep, so far, the candidates that I find most compelling. I wasn't going to do this, but I do not think Biden is our best bet. Strangely, my son, a millennial, a young millennial, thinks Biden is the best bet. I said, he's he's 70, he's older than me, and he's run before, and he says stupid things, and he's a wonderful guy, I think, but he's like, and I was stunned when my son said that. But this is a young kid who's also trying to figure out who can win. I don't know. It's a scary thing, isn't it? A vote. That you have a vote. And for those of us who take that seriously, it's daunting because you want to make the right decision. And to me, in this instance, the right decision is picking the person who can win. That's always the way I go about it. And I always get furious with people who go by, oh, I so love what so-and-so is saying. But, of course, so-and-so couldn't win a national election. So who can win? And I don't know. And guess what? Neither do you. So it's scary that all of a sudden we're charged with figuring that out. Of all the people so far that I think I started that sentence a while ago and then somehow lost it, that I'm drawn to, I must say the guy whose name I can't pronounce is the one. And more than not being able to pronounce it, I can't even begin to imagine learning to spell it. And you know what? To me, that's a real problem, isn't it? Unless he makes sort of a joke about it, so it becomes everybody, yeah, that guy, whatever. I think it has to be almost made into something sort of funny because Buttigieg, and I don't really think that's a proper pronunciation, but that's the one I'm going with, is really impressive to me. The youngest, and some people say he's too young. He's just too young. I mean, even the founding fathers, at a time when life expectancy wasn't anywhere near what it is now, thought that 35 would be a minimal age in terms of life experience to be the chief executive of this country. And Pete, as I guess we'll call him, isn't that his name, Pete? Pete, I can pronounce that, is what, 37? I think another leader of a nation that is 37, or maybe 38, is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. This impressive woman who gave birth just last year, her first child, and she's young, and she has handled the horror that has come to her country with a grace and an eloquence and a firmness of resolve and a open-armed heart for Muslims in her country. She's been just really impressive, as opposed to, of course, the guy who heads our country. So I don't know that age is not a big thing for me, on either end. But all I've talked about are white men, right? Yeah. Of the people who aren't white men, I really gotta know more. Kamala Harris looks like a very impressive candidate. A lot of people have it in for her because of her prosecutorial background. That could prove to be a problem. I don't know. Elizabeth Warren, smart as a whip, but somehow lacking that attractiveness, I think. She's the classic, not necessarily great skills as a candidate, I don't think, but probably an extraordinarily able executive. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm leaving out a whole bunch of people, right, in the process. The ones we don't know much about, the governor of Washington and former governor of Colorado, Hickenlooper, right? All these other people. Cory Booker, who for some reason I don't know, not sure about him. I don't know why. Is he the one? Who's the one that during the hearings did the Spartacus thing? Was that Cory Booker? Because I don't think it was. Whoever it was, I thought it was a real off-putting statement. It's funny how just one utterance can turn one potential voter off. Just one little thing that is said, and you think, ugh, and then you sort of take that person and put them to the side. It's so unfair. It's so silly. It's so nuts. And yet this is how we, I guess humans, generally make up our mind. So Biden will be in, and we'll all be yapping and talking about him. Booker was the one who did the Spartacus thing. It just so put me off. It's like he was looking. I mean, that was premeditated, I think. And he was looking for that soundbite that was going to break through. And I don't like that kind of calculation. I like a guy like Buttigieg, who clearly just talks from his heart and his head, speaks something like 8 languages? You name me a U.S. president that ever has, I mean, have we had any president that speaks another language? George W. sort of spoke some Spanish. We're not inclined. And so that would be amazing to have a president who could actually, and he's a Rhodes Scholar. His smartness is not up for debate, clearly. And his gayness doesn't seem to be getting much attention either. Of course it would in certain more conservative circles. But I don't know. Okay, I just wanted to say that because I saw this headline, Biden in. Right under the Biden in is a thing that the owner of the Patriots, Robert Kraft, has been offered a deal of some sort by prosecutors, and I don't think he'll accept it. That's my guess, because the deal is that he has to complete an education course about prostitution, that he has to complete 100 hours of community service, that he has to be screened for sexually transmitted diseases, and that he has to pay the court costs. And the biggie actually is, and I guess considered somewhat unusual, he would have to agree that if it were to go to trial, the state would be able to prove his guilt. So in other words, he has to essentially say, right, you got me, I'm guilty, I'll do all this other stuff too. And I can't see that happening. I cannot see that happening. Today's one of those days where I just have sort of a grab bag of stuff, just things I've seen. No big overarching themes. Bitcoin, which I never understood. As I said, I'm jumping around today. Also, front page Wall Street Journal story says that the price of Bitcoin is now down to $4,000. It's down to $4,000. None of this makes any sense to me, but what I did note is, so it's down to 4,000. I didn't know if that was horrible or what. It's pretty horrible, because just about a year and a half ago, it was 20,000. So people who are holding those Bitcoins, I mean, I can see holding them when each one's worth like 20,000, but it's down 85% in just about a year and a half. And clearly it's one of those volatile commodities. I don't know if it's how you even talk about it. But I don't know what that means. I'm just throwing it out there. Because it occurs to me that, news now, at least cable news, which so many people watch, is so focused on such a small view that you learn more than you need to know about some nonsense, and you don't even learn about the existence of other stories. I mentioned the other day that there had been a terrible hurricane in East Africa that had hit 3 of some of the poorest nations on Earth. And at the time I told you that, I said that the death toll was over 100 people, or 150 people. That hurricane now is believed to perhaps be the most, what's the adjective, destructive, powerful hurricane ever recorded in the southern hemisphere. It essentially wiped out a city of some 500,000 people. The death toll, obviously, a lot larger. Is that on the news? I'm just asking. Is it? Maybe it is. I can't say I watch a lot of it, but I don't know. Beth writes about Beto. I'm over the Beto saturation. Yeah, he was a media darling because he's, I don't know. What's that phrase, that sort of southern phrase? All hat and no what? Horse? What is it? All hat. What's that phrase? What? All hat and no cattle? Okay. And again, I don't want to trash any of these guys, but that's just sort of the I'm starting to worry about him because I'd been so enamored of him when he was running against Cruz. But we have to remember, he lost. He pulled a lot of people into the ballot. I think he helped a lot of other Democrats win. But who knows? Back to Beth. I worry the only reason we are hearing so much about him is because he raised so much money. Yeah, because that's what they focus on. Well, hell, if he raised $6.1 million in 24 hours, well, then he must be presidential timber. I mean, what? How up are we? Whoever has the most money wins? Whoever shows the capacity to attract the most money wins or gains our attention? Anyway, back to Beth. Sorry, Beth, I keep interrupting your email. She says, so Beto's campaign will be able to spend all that money on ads with those media companies who are covering him so much now. They figure some of that gold's coming their way. Yeah. It seems like those are the only candidates we ever hear about, the ones who've come out of the gate and raised tons of dough. If Beto could not beat the jellyfish named Ted Cruz in a red state, there's no way he can beat Trump. Okay, I'm not going to go that far, but I'm going to say that, yeah, at this point, all hat, no cattle to me, I think. Somebody's asking, how about Michael Avenatti? Are you kidding me? I don't think so. Oh, dear. Hey, I want to give you a heads up on something. For those of you who do believe that a city needs a newspaper, and for those of you who also fear that the Post Gazette looks like it's going down, and it is the only daily. It's not even a daily paper anymore. We don't have a daily newspaper in this town anymore. And what I'm talking about is one that, I can pick up. We already are there because the Post Gazette only... Right. They don't even print. They don't print an edition. They're just digital on Saturdays and maybe Tuesdays. Don't know. And if you think that it is hard to know what's going on in your community, you fear that government and private kinds of corruption will bloom without the Fourth Estate sort of nosing around, asking pesky questions, then you might be interested in this, because the Post Gazette is in extraordinary trouble. First of all, because it is headed by a Trump-loving, dim-witted, child-abusing creep who thinks by virtue of his inherited wealth he is our superior. But the poor folks who have been laboring over there to put that paper out, that you might rely upon, have not gotten a raise in, 13 years? As a matter of fact, I think they've been asked to give back. Can you imagine? Their benefits have been eviscerated. They've been in contract negotiations with the management there for a few years, I think, now, and management is, simply has employed a union-busting kind of a law firm. Nothing is getting accomplished. So I'm just saying that there is going to be picketing of the Post-Gazette's offices in support of the people who are the Post-Gazette, the reporters, the photographers, the editors, the people who do all the stuff we don't even think about when we pick up a paper. All of those people who have been taking it on the chin all this time, watching their brethren jump, ship, run, be downsized, watching the guys who they trusted to lead the paper leave or be pushed out. So Monday, that's what I'm getting at here, Monday from 4 to 6, if you could be in front of the Pittsburgh Post Gazette building, which, as you know, now is on the north side, right near the stadium. That'd be the Steelers Stadium, Heinz Field. The address being 358 North Shore Drive. It would be nice to lend support to these people and to let Mr. Blockhead see the support that his workers have, the people who actually put the paper out, not him. Because what the hell does he do? So just want to let you know this is to help them, to tell management there to bargain in good faith. If you want. Just wanted to spread the word. Oh, God. I happened to read this the other day, and I was so blown away by it that I have to share it with you. Excuse me. And I'm a little loath to, because I know that, well, never mind. Because it has to do with Jews, and Jews are just like, are a difficult topic right now, if you are one. And of course, because we know that there is an increase in global activity targeting Jews. And I just want to, this is from the Smithsonian. Actually, it's the Smithsonian from November. And if you look at the cover, the person who subscribed to it got cut out there because it was in a doctor's office, with a whole bunch of other Smithsonians. I want to credit the doctor who put Smithsonians in their office, because they don't age that rapidly. I mean, they're always interesting history and stuff like that. And their big story is about another diary of a young woman who wrote of her life as the Nazis came in, as she's ghettoized, as she lives in terror, as she falls in love, as all this, as she pleads to God that she somehow survives, as blah, 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 and then it ends. She's shot in the head. The last entry is done by her boyfriend, who had found a hiding place for her and his parents. He put them there, and 24 hours later, they'd been found and summarily executed. It's just another story of a life that never got lived. I was looking at the bios and pictures of some of the victims of the Christchurch massacre today. And my God, it rips your heart out. It rips your heart out. Lives, wondrous beings, lives with all of these possibilities just obliterated by hate, crazed hate. So this is just a fact I came across, and I wanted to share it with you because I think I know what it means. I'll leave you to figure out what you think it means. The place, Amsterdam, the Netherlands. I was lucky enough to go to Amsterdam, I don't know, maybe about 8 years ago, probably longer. 10 years ago, maybe more. You know how when you get old, you get really bad at time? You always think something happened just the other day, and it turns out, no, that was 20 years. What are you talking about? That was 20 years ago. You hear 1997, and you think, oh, that's and other people think, God, that was a million years ago. Whatever. So I was in Amsterdam, and one of the things, obviously, that I wanted to do while I was there was go to see Anne Frank's house, not her house. It's where they hid, where she wrote her diary, and it has been made into a museum. And happened we were staying at a place not far. Seems like we just walked a few blocks down the street, and there we were. And it's a very powerful experience to be in the room where she was, where her family hid for years. To imagine that, to be standing there, to know she wrote there, to know that that is where she was arrested. Anyway, Anne Frank is the most probably famous victim, right, of the Holocaust. Her diary has been translated into over 70 languages. So all over the world, this young girl's musings in her captivity have been read. What's interesting is that she becomes the one we all know because nothing in her writing suggests the Holocaust. We know something terrible is happening and that she's in hiding because she doesn't want to get caught, but she doesn't have real information about what exactly it is she fears if she were to be caught. And the people who did get caught and then who managed to write diaries or who somehow survived and wrote, their books don't get translated into 70 languages and read as much. So somebody pointed this out, so that the actual witnesses of the horror do not rise to being Anne Frank level, even though much of their work is every bit as eloquent and, in fact, more harrowing, and some of it written by extremely young people as well. Just saying. So imagine the Anne Frank house. They host millions of visitors from all over the world every year. And when you're there, you can get as you do the tour, you can plug into something in your language. And they have their audio tours in God knows how many languages, a gazillion of them. So you're walking through there with people who are listening in their own tongues to the reality that happened in those walls and to this child's words. So here's what I'm going to tell you. There was a young man who worked there just 2 years ago. This happened 2 years ago, year and a half ago, actually. And he was Jewish, and he was a Jewish young man who wore a skull cap, a yarmulke. When he showed up at work with it, he was told by his bosses at the Anne Frank house to cover it up, to put a baseball cap on or something, and to cover up his yarmulke. Now, try to digest that. Try to understand that. This is in a museum dedicated to this young child who, because of her religion, and only because of her religion, which was Jew. And here's a living Jew, not much older than her, who comes to work there wearing a skull cap. And he's told to hide it. I can't even get my head around that. And it turns out that it became a little bit of an issue. I think the kid said something like, "What?" Like, what? And the folks at the Anne Frank house held firm. The managing director of the Anne Frank Museum told reporters, because it got to that level, and listen to this, that a Jew wearing a yarmulke might interfere with the museum's independent position. I'm pausing here so that you try to, I want you all to use all those brain cells you have and parse that. You cannot wear a yarmulke as a representative of the Anne Frank Museum because it might interfere with the museum's independent position. I know what I think it means. 6 months later, the museum finally relented, caved. It took them 6 months Wouldn't you like to be a fly on the wall of those discussions? Okay, we'll let him wear the yarmulke. The Smithsonian piece, which is where I'm getting this, the author said this. The museum finally relented after deliberating for 6 months, which seems like a rather long time for the Anne Frank House to ponder whether it was a good idea to force a Jew into hiding. And then the author goes on to say, okay, so that could be some kind of a, I don't know, a misunderstanding if we try to make this seem okay. But it turns out that the previous year, some visitors to the museum, and I can't say I was one of them, noticed that in the place where you grab your audio guide, where you see which language you will choose, the audio guides were put up and represented by the flag of the nation. So the audio guide in German had a German flag. In Italian, it had the Italian flag. Yeah. English, who knows? Maybe the American or the English flag. I don't know. Only one country. There was one group, one country that didn't get their flag put up. I mean, that's a pretty incredible display of all those flags. Here. There was one country that didn't have a flag. Which one do you think? Yeah. Israel. So the Jews who came from Israel to Amsterdam to see where this child had hidden and written and feared and dreamed, if they were looking for the Star of David, blue on white, their flag, so they could get the Hebrew, they didn't see it. Amidst all the flags, that Jew flag was apparently deemed what? And I will go back to what the museum said initially. I think deemed to somehow interfere with the independent position of the Anne Frank fucking house. Excuse me. And I will say this quite clearly. They've learned nothing. We've learned nothing. I wanted to share that because it just took the wind out of my sails when I read it last night. In the Anne Frank house. All right. What else do I have? What other wonders? I don't recall this story, and I want to share it with you because it was It was in the Washington Post the other day, and I don't recall when this happened, but it happened here in Pennsylvania. Granted, I think in the more eastern part of the state, which sometimes seems like it's not the same state where we're living. But it involves a guy, well, he's dead now, named Gregory Longnecker. And Gregory Longnecker was 51 years old. He was a short order cook. This is in Berks County, eastern part of the state. Anyway, this made the Washington Post yesterday because Gregory Longnecker was killed in July of last year by police in the woods in a Pennsylvania in a game preserve. I believe a game preserve in Bucks County. And I don't remember this story, but his family is now suing the police for his death. And listen, I mean, as down the street here, another police officer is on trial and will get off. For the murder of a 17-year-old boy who was unarmed and running from them, shot in the back. But this guy is a 51-year-old white guy, short order cook, loved the Grateful Dead, liked smoking pot. Not an exemplary person, but no major criminal. And he was growing 10, count them, 10 pot plants in a little clearing hidden deep inside this game preserve. The cops found him there one day. He ran. They chased. He died. For 10 marijuana plants. Anyway, his family is filing a federal lawsuit. They're suing the state trooper, they're suing the game commission. A game commission employee happened to be clearing brush in the reserve, and he was on a bulldozer, and he took after the guy on his bulldozer. And that's how Longnecker died. He was run over by a bulldozer. It's extraordinary to me. That a whole they called in 2 nearby police departments. So you've got game commission employee, you've got state troopers, and you've got 2 nearby police departments all called in because they found 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 pot plants. This is last year. The cops initially said it's pot. We think maybe he had a heart attack because he was running, and then the guy driving the bulldozer didn't even. He was lying in the brush, didn't even see him, just ran right over him. The autopsy report said he didn't have a heart attack. He died of traumatic injuries. In fact, virtually every bone from his pelvis to his collarbone was crushed. While he's being chased by a bulldozer, 2 police departments, a state trooper for tending his 10 pot plants, they called in a helicopter. There's a helicopter buzzing overhead. The ACLU at the time called Longenecker the latest casualty in Pennsylvania's war on pot. Can you imagine that they thought that lethal force, can you imagine that these police thought that it was even worth their while to chase him? He had been there with a friend. The friend surrendered immediately. The friend could say, you know, he lives at so-and-so, so-and-so. You can go pick him up. He's sure to show up there in the next 24, 36 hours. But no. You can call in the helicopters. You can call in bulldozers. You can call in, and we can run and play cops. No thinking. No thought. No risk reward. Is this worth? Should somebody potentially die when we can get him, but we don't have to go to all this trouble? If he'd been caught and arrested, prosecuted, convicted under Pennsylvania's sentencing guidelines, the sentence he would have gotten for growing 10 pot plants on state land would have been, according to sentencing guidelines, probation. He wouldn't have served any time. So, the cops also said that the autopsy showed he'd been stoned. Oh, well, then he deserved to die. I don't remember that story at all, but I did see this, that the family has sued and is suing the Pennsylvania State Police, the Pennsylvania Game Commission, the trooper, the Game Commission employee who was riding the bulldozer, blah, 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 all of those folks. And can you imagine? This is what inept police who, they were not in fear of, sometimes with cops, you can say, well, it was a fraught situation. They didn't know if the guy had a gun or a this and a that. This was clearly no threat to them. We're talking about 10 plants. Overkill. So, I don't even, all these dead people. 2 pages full of dead people in today's New York Times with all those pictures of these wonderful people, some children, young women, old men. So, what else do I have? I wanted to tell you that I got other stuff, but I don't have time to get into it, do I? I sometimes do that to myself. I don't want to, but I'll share Trump's latest tweet. I don't know if it's his latest. But again, I got somebody sent me an email today trolling me for saying that Trump never colluded with anybody and how I'm going to lose my mind when nothing is provable, blah, 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 blah. And I want to say to the people who defend this guy, you don't have a leg to stand on in the moral universe. Not a leg. It's clear to any human being with any kind of a moral compass. He is the very definition of a loathsome human being. And he is not. If they don't prove he colluded with Russia, it's possible I'm not necessarily, that's not why he shouldn't be president. If they can't prove, there's still a million reasons why he shouldn't be president. He's a criminal. He's a con artist. He's a fraudster. He's a low-life crook. And if people can't see that, and he's such a damaged, ugly, hateful human being. Anyway. And this shows it. So George Conway, Kellyanne's husband, tweeted yesterday a tweet where he just took the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual for Psychologists and Psychiatrists, and tweeted out the indications of a mental illness called narcissistic personality disorder. And it was a portrait of Donald Trump. I mean, just down to the last syllable. So, Trump tweets this morning. George Conway, often referred to as Mr. Kellyanne Conway. I mean, right there. This is schoolyard. This is middle school level taunting. And this is the president, the representative of our great nation? How does someone not cringe in embarrassment? George Conway, often referred to as Mr. Kellyanne Conway by those who know him, is very jealous of his wife's success and angry that I, with her help, didn't give him the job he so desperately wanted. I barely know him, but just take a look. A stone-cold loser and husband from hell. And right now he's sitting in a meeting with Kellyanne Conway. How does... Okay, are we taking any bets on when that marriage breaks up? Huh? Barbara sends me this. The third-ranking Democrat in the House on Tuesday called President Trump and his family, quote, the greatest threats to democracy of my lifetime. I would say that, yes, that is true. My mother would not say that because she'd say Adolf Hitler was, and I'd agree with that. But the greatest threats to democracy of my lifetime. And he said Congress needed to do more to respond to the president's attempts to undermine American institutions. This is House Majority Whip James Clyburn is the one who said that. Yeah, well, I think he's seeing that right. In an interview with NBC, Clyburn said that he had once been asked if he has ever seen a toxic political climate like today's, and he said, "I have not, but I have studied history." And then he said this: Adolf Hitler was elected Chancellor of Germany, and he went about the business of discrediting institutions to the point that people bought into it. Nobody would have believed it now, but swastikas were hanging in churches throughout Germany. We had better be very, very careful. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's it. Hey, tomorrow, City Paper reporter Ryan Dito, who is just passionate about public transit, is going to be coming in and talking, and he's got some interesting stuff to say about the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission, the nonsense of this Hyperloop they're now talking about, we'll talk buses, bikeways, all that kind of stuff, all this transportation stuff. With Ryan, who definitely has a point of view. And I'm looking forward to it. 'Cause I don't always agree with him, but I pretty much think he's provocatively correct on much of what he says. So that he'll be coming by in the second part of the show tomorrow. Also talked to Rob Rogers yesterday. I'm hoping he'll stop in on Friday, but we might not be able to make that happen. At any rate, he'll be coming by soon. Okay? Thank you all so much for joining me, if in fact you did. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.